Alright, this is going to be our last real series on the British side of A-level history for the reform and popular protest between 1780 and 1885. I'm going to put these lessons onto the playlist with the other ones, because I've already done 1780 up till 1820. And obviously I did Chartism in another series, so I'll put them all together so they're easy to watch in a playlist, so you can go over everything that happened in the period. There's going to be some bits in between the topics in this series because I've put everything chronologically into a single PowerPoint. So the campaign for a free press between 1822 and 1830. Radical activity generally subsided in the 1820s due to economic recovery and the government's repression in the form of Lord Liverpools Six Acts, which did things such as imposing stamp duties on political periodicals to keep them out of the hands of the poor. This is a reference to the Publications Act of 1819. There was a campaign for a free press, led by Richard Carlile between 1822 and 1830, which called for an end to the aforementioned stamp duties. The demands of Carlile would later be taken up by the Chartists. So, the Scotch Cattle, and they were active between 1822 and the mid-1830s. The Scotch Cattle was the name adopted by bands of coal and iron workers. Well, I should say coal there, not cola. So, by bands of coal and iron workers in South Wales, whom would wear disguises which varied from full leather costumes to their ordinary worn clothes pulled inside out. They would wear these disguises and visit the homes of other local miners who were working during a strike or cooperating with employers against the local community in other ways. So these kind of workers are either nicknamed blacklegs or scabs by the Unionists. The Scotch Cattle would then ransack the workers' property or attack them physically, but it should be noted that the cattle had strict rules against stealing food. The disturbances caused by the Scotch cattle can largely be denoted to the economic depression in their sector caused by the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the fact that they had poor living conditions, and a series of wage reductions which occurred in 1822, 1830, and 1832. The years where Scotch cattle disturbances were the most serious. The cattle were also motivated to prevent strangers from learning how to mine without their permission, thus protecting the miners' trade in a similar manner to medieval guilds. So, the primary aim of the cattle in terrorizing those who worked during a strike was to enforce solidarity among the mining community. The cattle operated as such. A secret meeting could be held at night. Men working during a strike, so blacklegs, may be warned by a posted notice that they were at risk of an attack. If the target did not comply to their demands and join the strike, a, quote, herd of 300 men would visit their house at night, led by a bull. The herd would generally be called in from a neighbouring town, so they would not be recognised. Disguises would also be worn. The herd would then announce their presence by blowing on horns and rattling chains. They may also moo very loudly, which I imagine making comical to an observer, but I assume it'd be frightening if it was your house with 300 men mooing outside of it. So they would then smash the doors and windows of the house down, burning fabric items on a bonfire. If the worker resisted, he would be beaten severely. The cattle would sometimes use firearms, but without much intent to use them. There was an incident in 1834 where a miner's wife was shot and killed by a visiting herd, and the authorities responded by executing a man who was involved in the shooting, called Edward Morgan. The actions of the Scots Cattle were not always driven by the desire to enforce a strike, as sometimes truck shops would be raided, as obviously the miners detested them, and uninvolved neighbouring houses to strikers would be raided due to the desire of the herd to plunder. The members of the cattle were sworn to secrecy under the sufferance of death. Each town would have a cell with its own leader, nicknamed a bull, as you mentioned before, and meetings were always held in complete secrecy. The authorities found it difficult to deal with the Scotch Cattle due to the extreme secrecy of the organisation and the fact that the general population refused to speak out against them out of fear. The military were called in, but this failed to stop the cattle's violent tactics, and rewards of large sums of money failed to obtain any information about the perpetrators of these violent acts. It got so serious that Lord Melbourne, the then Home Secretary, was obliged to visit Abergavenny to discuss the matter with the local magistrates, and a notice was written in Welsh to the workers which stated, "To all colliers, traitors, turncoats, and others, we hereby warn you for the second and last time. We are determined to draw out the hearts of all men above named, and fix 2 hearts upon the horns of the bull, so that everyone may see what is the fate of every traitor, and we know them all." As time progressed, the intentions of the movement were forgotten, and innocent people were being robbed, attacked, and killed. The cattle eventually fizzled out following the execution of Edward Morgan for killing Joan Thomas, the wife of the Blackleg, in 1815. The publicity of this execution frightened the cattle and caused many victims to begin naming members of the cattle. In your exam, it would be wise to compare the tactics of the Scotch Cattle to the tactics of the new model unions which operated in the 1850s, to enforce the idea put forth by the junta that the model unions were a stabilising force for the working class, which reduced violence. So that's it for the Scotch Cattle. We've already gone over the swing riots in our lesson on radicalism in the 1820s, so I'll skip over that. We'll probably go up until the Merthyr Rising in this lesson. So, the Bristol Riots of 1831. The Bristol Riots were a response to the rejection of the Second Reform Bill by the House of Lords. The local magistrate of Bristol, Sir Charles Wetherell, visited Bristol to open the new Assize Courts on October 29th, and when he arrived, he threatened to imprison the participants in the disturbance going on outside. In response, the rioters chased Wetherell to his mansion house in Queen Square. Wetherell then either escaped with a disguise or over the rooftops. The rioters numbered 500 to 600 young men, and they were rioting for 3 days. The rioters committed a great deal of arson and looted private property. The riots caused the construction of Clifton Suspension Bridge to be postponed, and Isambard Kingdom Brunel, as pictured on the left, he was a famous engineer, was sworn in as a special constable. So, that's it. Yeah, we'll go over Merthyr next lesson. So that's it for pretty much the Campaign for a Free Press by Richard Carlile, the Scotch Cattle, and the Bristol Riots.